Good morning, Bucknutters. It is Tuesday, July 16th, 2024. I am Dan Rubin. This is the Bucknuts Morning 5 and Change. Got my guys coming up here in a sec, Bill Kurelic and Mark Porter. But first, I got to tell you about Goodr. How many times have you been to a Buckeyes game? Maybe a noon kickoff. You got on your prescription sunglasses. You hang out all day. You wake up the next morning. You ain't got no sunglasses. This happened to me all the time. I solved this by using Goodr. Stylish sunglasses starting at only $25 a pair. I got 3. No slip, no bounce, all polarized, all fun. You get a 1-year warranty, 30-day free returns. They are all different styles, all different colors, small, large, medium, depending on how big your face is. Really a solid investment. I used to actually stop at like a Stop and Go or a Krausers, whatever you call that, and buy like the $5 sunglasses for a game. But those things are so rickety and they will break. They've got a new product called the Retro G, vintage inspired shades. They won't slip or bounce, available in 4 colors. There's one of those is called Threaten Me with a Good Time. I have these. Call me Tarmac Daddies. If I can wear these on the tarmac to go see Ohio State play Oregon on Bucknuts 1, we will rock those. And we want you guys to get some of these. So if you want to show support to this show and try a pair of Goodrs, but the Bucknuts Morning 5 listeners are getting free shipping. Go to Goodr.com, GOODR.com/Bucknuts and use code Bucknuts for free shipping. Goodr offers a 30-day money-back guarantee and 100% satisfaction. Again, that's Goodr.com/Bucknuts and use code Bucknuts for free shipping. All right. Our guys here, both wearing glasses, neither wearing Goodrs because they're inside. But gentlemen, appreciate you guys stopping by once again on a Tuesday. That's today, right? I lose track. Bill, you had a story earlier this week about commitments coming. Going to be an interesting week for commitments. Certainly an interesting time for Ohio recruiting. But one of the guys to commit, Jarquez Carter, as indicated by the headline here. Florida defensive tackle. Maybe hasn't been discussed as much as the others. But if they were to add him, that would be a 6th defensive lineman in the class. We pine for linemen. What's it looking like?
Well, first of all, anybody that is on the train of we need to do better and more recruiting in the trenches, if they get Jarquez Carter, like you said, Dan, you cannot say that they are not recruiting in the trenches on the defensive side of the ball, at least, because that would be 6. And it would be 3 defensive tackles and 3 edge defensive ends. That's pretty well rounded. And the quality, I think is really good. Jarquez Carter may not be the highest rated guy, but he's really good. And I think, Mark had his video. We watched it last week, and I think it didn't take long for Mark to get sold on Jarquez Carter. Ohio State is sold on Jarquez Carter. In fact, if you look at his final 5, he is a take at every one of those schools right now. Ohio State, Florida, Miami, Penn State, UCF, every school that he made an official visit to would take him right now. He is going to announce on Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern time. He'll do it at Newberry High School, Newberry, Florida. He told me he will have the hats on the table type thing and do it kind of the traditional way. It'll also be on all the social media and all that. Again, 4 o'clock on Thursday. And I've been saying for a bit of time now that I like Ohio State in this one. I've said Ohio State is going to take him if they can get him. And I know Florida and Miami are too. I like Ohio State in this one, right? As I've said for a bit of time now.
Going to go to Mark here in a sec, Bill, but I must ask this question now in this era. Do you have any fear of Jarquez Carter hitting the lottery before he joins the team? Possibly.
I don't think in this era, as you put it, Dan, I don't think I can ever rule that out. I guess on the bright side, when you talk about that. Oregon's not involved.
Facts. Stay away, Phil. All right. Marcus, take us through your thoughts on Jarquez Carter.
Yeah, when we watched him the other day, it was immediate praise and tons of it. So the second time through, let's see if this gets us as excited. But what got us excited is that elite quickness and that get off, as you saw right there. He's running by and through people before they can get their hands on him. The explosion at his size is rare. We do this a lot on this podcast over the past year. Since we started watching video, we've watched a bunch of 3-stars that their value is definitely going up. I mean, I don't know, how they're doing rankings, but I value get off and I value that explosion because that's a trait that you don't find in these big guys very often. And when you see this guy with that motor and that get off, it just, he's going to be successful in college because those traits usually win out. I think I said he was like a little Warren Sapp, maybe a JV version of Warren Sapp. I was trying to think of a guy down south there, but boy, does he move. And that's the way Warren Sapp was, that load in the middle that just with that first step, once he started north and south, whatever was in his way or whatever gap he was penetrating, he got through it. So, like a bowling ball got loose, like that clip right there, just he's so active with his feet. And yeah, you're right. The film doesn't lie. So I think this is a kid that, outdoes his ranking would be fair to say.
Mark, compare him to former Ohio native and Buckeye and current Cleveland Brown Mike Hall, because Mike's deal was, and I'll say this, Mike got off the ball so fast in high school, he ran by 100 tackles in a good way.
Yeah. I was hoping that's the name you were about to say. As you say, compare him to, I'm like, please say Mike Hall.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, Mike Hall was the first step guy, the first step king. In high school, he had the club on his arm the one year, and it didn't matter because his first step was still putting him into the backfield. So, you could see that the hands and the way he would shed blocks wasn't as important that year as his first step. He did just as much damage. But I think that's a great comparison or a great comp, as they say. The weight thing, we'll see how he gets in the weight room, what his weight ends up at, how big he gets. But as long as he doesn't lose this first step, I'm sold.
Yeah, the weight and all that stuff, their size is really, you're talking about guys who are naturally enormous human beings about to get into a crazy weight program where their nutrition is so, it's handled very expertly, as it were, in terms of growth. So the get off is the thing you can't teach. That's natural. That's mom and dad. So we'll leave the rest. Go ahead.
I think when I talked to Deontay Armstrong and Devontae Armstrong, they said the first thing that happened to them when they got on campus was 9,000 calories a day.
Wow.
9,000. Okay. So, think of what that would do to you if you tried to eat 9,000. We're all trying to stick probably under 2,000. Have at it. I bet you couldn't get to 9,000 if you tried in a day without making yourself sick. So when these guys get to college, it's like an injection of jet fuel of power bars and protein drinks and all these things that are really designed to turn you into the next level. So like you said, they're already large humans. But Bill and I'll tell you, we go to camp a year later and we looked at Montgomery and said, oh, my goodness. And other young players that you're like, this isn't the same kid we saw in high school last year. And we thought when we saw him in high school, he looked off the charts. So think about 6,000 to 9,000 calories a day, what that'll do for a big man.
Dan, you mentioned any worry about someone swooping in the last minute. And I said the good news is Oregon's not involved. Well, flip side, the bad news is, I guess, Miami is involved. And they have, in the last year or two, pulled a rabbit out of the hat with a late offer. Anybody remember a certain 5-star defensive lineman last year that matriculated to Miami that was committed to Ohio State. So and I saw somebody say, are you ready to crystal ball him? I guess that a week ago, I was told by a good source that Miami was not the most confident that they were going to get Jarquez Carter. But again, it is the NIL. And last-minute things do happen.
Those rabbits come out of the hat, thankfully wrapped in $100 bills, because I don't think anyone wants a pet rabbit. Let's be honest here. All right. Other commitments coming this week, Bill, before we get, these are kind of the interesting Ohio vibes here. Two other guys you mentioned early in your story this week. I'll just let you take it from here because one of them made a run at records that we have here for being named and not being favored to go to the Buckeyes. So I'll let you take it away. People can guess who that is.
Yeah, that would be, I believe you're referring to Trey McNutt. He is announcing, Jarquez is announcing on July 18th, and Trey McNutt is announcing on July 19th. And I would be surprised if things stand right now that I'd be surprised if it's not Oregon. He hasn't made an official visit to Ohio State. To me, the intrigue, I guess you'd say, would be, he's consistently said that he figures he'll get back to Ohio State. And I've asked Trey point blank, if you were to commit to somebody else, would you still get back to Ohio State for an official visit during the season? And his answer has been he's thinking affirmatively he would probably do that or would do that. So that's kind of I don't expect him to announce for Ohio State on July 19th, but after he does so, announcing somewhere else, as I think he will he eventually get back and make an official visit to Ohio State? So that's the other one. And then you've got July 21st, Vernell Brown, wide receiver from Florida. I don't expect that one to go to Ohio State's way either. I think Ohio State now is racing, and I've been saying this for quite a while. It's pretty much down. If there's going to be a wide receiver addition in this class, by the way, I think Vernell Brown is going to Florida. In fact, I believe I crystal balled him there yesterday. He's got it's in home state, and he's got family there or went there. His dad played there. I believe his grandpa, I think it was his grandfather played there or went there. And I think he had another family member as well. So a lot of family background for Vernell Brown in Florida. Which is part of the reason that I did not crystal ball him like some people were early to Ohio State. And there was actually a decent amount of crystal balls for him to Ohio State. I was worried about the Florida schools with him, and that's what's going to happen. I think, like I said, it's really down at this point to two players that Brian Hartline could add for this class. One of them being Phillip Bell from California. We talked about him and the horrible situation that happened in his life. His mom passed away not very long ago. And he had been planning to announce right around her birthday or on her birthday. Just a horrible situation. But Phillip Bell would be one of them that Ohio State could add. And then Preston Bowman, the Kentucky commitment, is the other. I think those are the two. And I've been saying this for a while, that Brian Hartline could still add to his repertoire of wide receivers.
Yeah, it does seem to me that, and we've discussed this, I don't know if they'll come out and admit this, there's a sandwich thing going on here with the receivers in terms of overclass. And I would just say this, provided everything goes the way we want, which is air quotes, Jeremiah Smith is going to line up as a junior, and Chris Henry is also going to be on the team. So that will be a meat sandwich of greatness, but you're going to have to wait a little bit for that. All right, just to back up, speaking of meat, just to back up what Mark said, Dietrich said, Devin's calories is 6,000 per what they told us. Keep in mind, Devin and the Armstrong brothers will not be lining up next to each other. So maybe the 9,000 is for the bulkier types. Double everything he eats. I'm sure that bums him out totally. Listen, that was my favorite thing about both my boys going to college. Are they going to feed me twice? That's how you would get them in committing. I don't know the answer to this. Yeah, these always. Yeah, I mean, come on. These are we sometimes forget when we talk about these kids that they're like some of the best athletes walking the earth. We'll let them handle things. All right, Bill, this is interesting. What do you make of Naeem Offord's comments recently? The other Alabama recruit, we've got a couple from down there. The second-rated corner in the country behind Devin. He's had some chatter that's made people a little bit nervous. Your thoughts?
Well, I was asking Mike in the dean's office chat last week, anybody that you're concerned about flipping from Ohio State. And I said, I wouldn't necessarily say a huge concern, but I said, I think there's three guys that people should be aware of that I would at least have on the possible flip meter. Zaire Mathis, who made an official visit to Penn State. Naeem Offord, who made an official visit to Alabama, also made an unofficial visit there in the spring. And, and he's looking at Auburn. They're recruiting him hard. Those were, two of the guys I mentioned. And somebody said, why in the world would you mention Naeem Offord? No, he has showed no inclination whatsoever having any intention of possibly flipping. I said, the fact that he's visited Alabama twice, that would show me that maybe I should at least have him on my meter. Now, Auburn is certainly involved too. In fact, he has mentioned Auburn and Oregon, not Alabama. So I think that the official visit that he made and getting on campus and being with Devin Sanchez was really helpful to Ohio State and really helpful to Naeem Offord. Having said that, you're going to have to recruit him all the way through the process and work really hard to keep him in the class.
Yeah, there's a definite Alabama vibe to this recruiting class, just in terms of exit Saban, enter Kalen DeBoer. I didn't think he would get off to such a good start, Bill, but they're making a serious run at Ohio State right now. Let me read our next ad, and then we will talk about Alabama, and we'll talk about the whole shebang, because if you look, Alabama's making a run at your Buckeyes. It's not going to be just Oregon and Georgia making a run here. What's the best way to learn a language? Immersion. Living where the language is spoken and using it every day. But if that's not in the cards, you can still learn a language the second best way, and that's with Babbel. 1 in 5 Americans have learned a new language on their bucket list. If that's you, make 2024 the year you finally check it off the list with Babbel. My family is going to Italy. I am not going because of this fine job, but to watch my son play basketball in Italy, and my wife is taking some Italian on the line here, and hopefully that will keep her from getting lost and me from getting a call from Italy to fix something I have no chance of fixing from across the water, but I digress. Babbel's tips and tools are approachable, accessible, rooted in real-life situations, and delivered with conversation-based teaching so you're ready to practice what you've learned in the real world. We have a special limited-time deal for our listeners right now. This is really actually a good deal. Get 60% off your subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/Bucknuts. It's spelled BABBEL.com/Bucknuts. Rules and restrictions may apply, but 60% off, and that is a must. All right, Bill.
Now, Dan, before you start, I have a question. Why is it when my daughter was playing softball, she went to Paris to play softball? Why? And my wife went, and your wife is going, and I stay. What's the deal here? The husband has to stay home, I guess. I don't understand this.
Here's what's happening in this case. They scheduled the trip for the week of the opener. And when you work at Bucknuts, there's like 2 weeks of the year you cannot vacation on. And I'll take this as the basketball coaches didn't want the coach from the stands going to Italy and affecting their ability to win games. That may or may not be me, but it should be a good time. We actually found out today they're playing against Andrea Bargnani's team in one of their 3 games. So hopefully Jaron gets an offer before he leaves. He'll never come home. That would be good for me. All right, Bill, Alabama. Will they finish with the #1 recruiting class? Should we be worried about Offord? Are you worried about Kalen DeBoer? Generally speaking, are you surprised Alabama is recruiting as well as they have?
Well, we talked about this about a month ago. I said quietly, Kalen DeBoer is really doing a great job. He's not getting perhaps enough kudos for the work he's done. People dancing on the grave of Alabama, dancing a little too soon. Now, he's still got to go out in the SEC and win games and all, but my goodness gracious, he has done a great job recruiting. I could absolutely see them finishing with the number one class in the country. Right now, Ohio State has a slight lead, but it's close. Ohio State obviously has to finish, I think, to hold the top spot with David Sanders and probably a few others too. But without Sanders, I think Alabama will finish. If Ohio State doesn't get Sanders, I think Alabama will likely finish with the number one class. But more important, Ohio State needs David Sanders because they need David Sanders, not
no doubt.
Not because of finishing number one in the rankings, but they need David Sanders.
We can't put the David Sanders video on right now because I've had too much caffeine this morning, and there's a chance my heart might palpitate out of its chest. But instead, we will discuss this. I'd like both your comments on this. We were discussing this before the show, and I'll say what I said. Will Conroy, offensive lineman from Ohio State, has come out with his final schools, and Oregon and Ohio State are not among them. He has crystal balls rolled to Ohio State and Oregon on there, and I'm saying I don't think in the time that I've been covering recruiting that a guy has come out with a list, had crystal balls rolled, then come out with another list, and none of those schools were on the list. William, take the mic.
Well, it is a unique situation. And I've talked to Will many times. He's really outstanding young man. And he always has mentioned Oregon and Ohio State. In fact, he came out with a top 6. That included those two schools a while back. And then I talked to him about a week ago, and he talked very highly of Oregon and Ohio State. As you mentioned, Danny, came out then with a top 5 yesterday. Now, I will say I'm not necessarily certain that's his final 5. Because when I asked him, that question about the top 6, I said, is that your top 6 or your final 6? And, after we discussed, he said, well, I wouldn't necessarily say my final 6. He said that, things could change and everything. Those are the 6 right now. And, he will look at it as he moves forward. Well, they obviously weren't his final 6 at that point, because one school, Arizona State, wasn't in that 6, but now they're in the 5 that he released. I think it is a moving target right now. I think that these are the 5 that he's focused on right now. And he has, as I look back at our conversations, all those 5 schools, he has mentioned them to me. He had kind of like a 5, 7, 8 schools. And now he's got a 5 that doesn't include Oregon and Ohio State. Could it be that he was ready to commit to Oregon or Ohio State and the offers aren't necessarily committable just yet? Maybe. That's possible. But, if I just don't see Ohio State and Oregon both dropping him, so to speak, at this point in the recruitment and just totally dropping him. That does not make sense, especially when he's not even played his junior season yet. So that doesn't really totally add up to me. I think more along the lines of maybe he wants to commit at this point.
Yeah. That makes sense. Mark, your thoughts on the situation? You've seen pretty much every offensive lineman or almost all of them that we've offered that are in the mix. You've done reviews on him. Do you see Conroy as a must-get type? Are you surprised by what's going on? Your general vibe, knowing the scene.
Yeah, I saw Conroy as a type that when he got the offer, if he wanted to be a Buckeye, he should have jumped on it. He wasn't the 6'7" national prospect. He was the interior center guard type that, doesn't have as much value just by position. Tackles are more valuable than guards. 6'5", 6'7" guys are more valuable. So when I see guys like Jake Cook get offered and some of these other guys that, hey, we're going to give you a chance because you're an Ohio kid and we think you have upside and we think you're going to be a program kid that after a couple of years of hard work, you'll be able to start for us. Those kids need to jump on these offers and not, string them along or whatever. I don't think there's anyone better at reading tea leaves than Bill Kurelic. Right. I mean, that's kind of what we do. I mean, a lot of these kids – hide their information on purpose, make it hard to figure out on purpose. And guys like Bill usually can peel away a few layers of the onion and kind of figure out what's going on. And I think Bill may have nailed it where the offer might not have been committable yet. And, he might have been an offer. He's an Ohio kid. He's extraneous. And, there may be other guys on the board. That's one way to read it. But, no one really knows this for sure. Or it seems like he did a good job in get around and actually visiting places and going to the campuses and doing some due diligence with his family. And maybe they came to a family decision and said, these other places are nice, but these may feel more like home. You may be the guy. Marquise Davis went to Kentucky, and a lot of the talk was he wanted to be the guy. He didn't want to be the second running back or, the 20th best player in the class. He wanted to be the guy. Now, with, people bringing in 4 or 5 O-linemen, wouldn't you like to be the top O-lineman in the class, the one that's penciled in as a starter first? I'm sure he's seen film of David Sanders and some of these other guys and realized that when those guys walk on campus, they're kind of slid right into the lineup immediately, and he'd have to maybe work his way in. But again, these are just tea leaves, and as we flip them, you're right. Very strange that you have 2 schools that you're telling reporters you love and are flattered for the offers, and then you don't include them in your top 5. That there's where there's smoke, there's fire there.
I don't.
I got to go back. I'll bet you this name you guys will not be familiar with. This dates me a little bit. Bob Hitchens. Anybody remember that name?
He was my chemistry teacher in 5th grade back in.
Not the same one. Bob Hitchens was a running back at Grove City, and a good running back. He had a scholarship offer from Ohio State and some other big schools. He picked a MAC school. And why did he wanted, as he put it, he didn't want to be a small fish in a big pond. He wanted to be a big fish in a small pond. And that's the direction he went. And that really
got him.
Shows my gray hair. That one dates me.
And it worked. Bob Hitchens, the most well-known running back he should have gone to Ohio State, Bob. Anyway, I digress.
I was like, you can't tell us that story and then not tell us what Bob Hitchens did at the MAC school and then if he made it to the NFL. I mean, come on. I got to hear the end of this.
Mark, when I first started covering recruiting, that used to be one of the most common things they'd say to you is like, "Are you going to go to Miami? You remember Bob Hitchens?" And they'd be like, "No." And they'd be like, "Exactly. Come to Ohio State." Anyway.
And I honestly do not remember if he made it to the NFL or not.
Which MAC school?
Bob Hitchens from Grove City.
Which MAC school, Bill?
Gosh, if I remember right, it was Miami of Ohio, but don't 100% hold me that. I believe it was Miami of Ohio. This has been a long time. This has been, probably 40 years ago.
Someone needs to know Bob Hitchens in the chat and get Bob Hitchens in here. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, he recently passed away.
Go.
And he was
there it is. Bob Hitchens, Miami. I was right.
Yeah, recently
that's in a steel trap.
I mean, I should say recently, in a few years ago in 2020. But yeah, that's the guy.
God bless his soul.
That was a digression. Thank you, Bill.
Bullet Bob Hitchens. You knew he would get it done down the stretch. You could always count on Bullet Bob.
Tell you what, he was a monster in high school, and I mean that in a good way.
Following graduation, the great Bob Hitchens played professional football for 2 years with the New England Patriots, Kansas City Chiefs, and Pittsburgh Steelers. Not bad.
There we go.
That's not bad. I've always wanted to talk about this, and I know Dan's real big on when players get to Ohio State, they get developed. I think if you're good enough to get offered by Ohio State, you could go anywhere else, and if you work the same way, that talent should take you where Ohio State thought it was going to take you. And I think sometimes we get if you don't go to Ohio State, you won't be what you're supposed to be or what your talent says you should be. But we don't get very many case studies like Bob Hitchens to say unless Ohio State players transfer out, and then sometimes they'll go pro when they transfer out. But, talent's talent. And boy, I don't see too many kids having that perspective in this day and age where I'm going to go be that big fish over in that small pond. It seems like they all want to be big fish in the big pond, and they want to cannibalize each other to the point where not all of them can make it.
Here's the question.
Which is good.
Bob,
Which is good for the teams with all the big fish.
Here's the question. If you want to bring this to the modern Bob Hitchens vibe, would Bob Hitchens have gone to Miami if Ohio State's NIL offer was considerably bigger? Because what's happening now is maybe Miami spent all their NIL on the great Bob Hitchens. Of course, who wouldn't? I mean, seriously. But that's now a huge factor in there that we have to take into account. There was something else I wanted to talk about here that was interesting.
You mean there was no NIL 40 years ago? Imagine
now,
that.
under the table, everyone knew Bob Hitchens was going to get paid. Let's just be honest, because he was that good, but not everybody. But for example, we were talking about Vernell Brown. I would guess, and I don't know this, that Vernell Brown ranks higher on Florida's NIL list than he does at Ohio State, and that might work for him there. And like I said, these are uncharted waters, man. We don't know what's going. Like I know everyone's worried about losing these Ohio guys, but we're just starting this. So let's see where we are in 5-6 years. You know what I'm saying? If this is a trend, if we're losing great Ohioans and they're going elsewhere and starring, and the guys that Ohio State opted to take aren't playing as well, then you have one thing. But let's just let this play out a little bit, because you're now in a salary cap era. There's only so many dollars to go around. People are getting chosen and yada, yada. So
somebody there, Troy V, echoed you, Dan. He said NIL 40 years ago was an envelope handshake.
It was. Or they slip it in your blazer and say, welcome to the. All right. Let's see if we have any other good questions here. Look, I get that we're not going to sit here and talk every day about Justin Fry and how everyone wants him run out on a rail if they don't get David Sanders. That will take care of itself if they don't get David Sanders. The site will crash, and then we will rebuild the site, and we can all talk about it. But there's no point in getting in on that now. And then people who are asking for David Sanders updates, we'd love to give them to you. Bill, tell me if I'm wrong. I don't get the sense there's a lot of information coming out of the Sanders camp right now.
No, there's really not anything to report. We've said it all. I mean, he's going to announce his decision, and it's not for a month, August 17th. You can give every update you want at this point, but in a month's time, that's a lifetime when it comes to recruiting. And we still got almost exactly a month, actually. Like I said, August 17th.
It will be an interesting ride. I don't think we're going to get a ton of information before then. So circle that date on your calendar. Circle Thursday on your calendar for these guys to be back. We appreciate everybody stopping by. Have a good one, Bucknutters.